What's up, everybody, and welcome to the State of Wild, episode 23, a regular podcast, YouTube video, web series thing. My name's Meowth. As usual, I'm joined by Corbett. Corbett, how you doing, friend?
Hey, what's up, Meowth? I'm doing quite well. How are you?
Doing pretty well. So we just had a big holiday here in the States, so I am still full from 2 days ago when we had Thanksgiving. But I would also like to point out that we've been doing this podcast now long enough together where you've gone from wearing sweatshirts and me short sleeve shirts to kind of the opposite now, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, so for those of you guys that are tuning in for maybe the first time, just a reminder that we try to do 3 things during a normal episode. I know it's been a while since we've done a normal episode, but today's going to be one of those. But we plan on doing 3 things. So we're going to be talking about the metagame. So what's strong, how to beat it, and texts or decks that might be flying underneath the radar. Second, we talk wild news, controversial topics, and maybe the lack thereof. And last but not least, we talk about our decks of the week. But before we get started, just a reminder to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy our content. Help us out with that YouTube algorithm. It's free and it actually does support us a ton. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So talking about the metagame, it's just been another week. Have your impressions of the meta changed at all?
Not really, I don't think. I did a video, sort of my very early impressions, and I think if I went and re-recorded it, my script probably wouldn't have to change all that much. So I think that the expectation was really that this would be a very low impact set in Wild. Mm-hmm. So far, I haven't had any reason to believe that's wrong. And so things haven't really changed at all, I think, past that first like 24, 48 hours. I don't know, it feels relatively stagnant, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would say at the top, it feels relatively stagnant.
Yeah,
right?
At least at the top type of decks. Yeah, exactly.
The top 4 or 5 decks, still the very same decks. I think very few new cards. I think Odd Paladin might be the only one running some new stuff. Maybe Aggro Druid and Arena Priest picking up 1 or 2 cards. I think the impression or the meta has changed a lot of like the tier 2, tier 3 decks. A lot of those decks have gotten a lot stronger, right? We're talking like Secret Mage, Odd Demon Hunter, right? Got a huge kind of rework. Galahorn, like a lot of these tier 2, tier 3 decks look a lot different, play a lot stronger, but kind of they're being suppressed by the top 2 or 3 decks, right? The new toys that they're getting don't help them in those matchups, and so the meta hasn't really shifted too much, right? But I do want to point out that I think the tier 2, tier 3 portion of the metagame, while not what gets all the headlines, right? Because Arena Priest is the top dog, and then we talk about Aggro Druid and Dark, all that kind of good stuff. I think the past, like this expansion in Skullomance, like we've seen the most expansive tier 2, tier 3 kind of decks in the metagame that we've ever seen. Like you can hit Legend with any of those decks, right? You have like 20, maybe 25 decks to pick from when you play Wild if you want to try to hit Legend, which I think is awesome, right? For those of you guys that aren't into the super tryhard Legend, I think it's pretty great. And outside of the top dogs, right? I think that the top tier is pretty far from tier 2, tier 3. But I'm really enjoying messing around in the tier 2, tier 3. I went in deep diving into the dumpster this month, which has been pretty awesome.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When I've been kind of in my collection, I've kind of just been building the decks that I feel like comfortable with, like that I feel good about. And it's gotten to the point now where I have like a full like 16, 17 decks that I feel fine playing on stream at high ranks, and I don't feel like I'm really disadvantaging myself all that much.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yes, I definitely agree. There's a lot of stuff that feels comfortable, competitive, like exactly what you're saying. There's a lot of stuff that can hit Legend. That's usually true in Wild, obviously, where most people can hit Legend with a variety of stuff, or they have the option to. But in this particular meta, it definitely feels like that, right? Where there's a bunch of, I could probably name like 3 dozen archetypes that I'd feel comfortable saying, yeah, it's Legend viable, kind of thing, which is great for sure. The thing that I did notice though, when I was building these decks that I was comfortable with, they were very much in a similar similar vein, where there was a lot of aggro, and there it is. It's like the meta so far feels like it's very much aggro and Reno, and there's not a ton of in between. There's very little combo stuff going on.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, while I definitely agree that it is diverse in the types, in the number of archetypes you can play, the sort of strategies that are seeing played do feel narrow.
That's fair. I would say every class, I'm pretty sure every class has access to a very, very strong aggressive archetype. Whereas not every class has access to very strong control tools, right? I think I would be comfortable saying that there's 4 really strong Reno decks. right? Reno Priest, Reno Mage, Reno Lock, and to a lesser extent Reno Hunter are the 4 good Reno decks. And then for combo decks, or I would say like anti-control decks, right? You kind of have Q Block, Big Priest, and then Quest Mage and Malaga's Druid. And those decks all kind of fold to all of the aggressive strategies that you see. So that's why I think you're left with just Reno and aggro. And
yeah,
I would say that like combo, I personally, I know we talked a little bit about this before the recording happened, but I don't think combo's dead. I just think that combo is currently Reno Priest, which also happens to be the best control deck. So that's why you're not really seeing a ton, because Reno Priest kind of pushes out these anti-control decks, right? It beats Big Priest, it beats Big Shaman, it beats Key Block, and so you're not really getting these anti-control decks like you might see normally. I wouldn't really say it's an issue. I mean, it's just kind of a feature of Reno Priest.
What it is, what it is, right?
Yeah,
That's yeah, it's just discussing what it looks like. I hadn't really considered that point as much, where the idea that Reno Priest is actually pushing a lot of the stuff that the Quest mages and the Malagos should be feasting on, and that's why it's really becoming this sort of more of a like a dichotomy in terms of like what's seeing play. But yeah, I do think as well though it is partially because a deck like Reno Priest did get a lot better in like the combo matchup if it wants to be, where it can run a Lucia. So combo didn't really. A lot of the combo decks haven't really made up that percentage a ton, and they've been getting a lot worse into aggro. A lot of the aggro decks that we're going to be talking about, they got a lot better. Like what you're saying, whether it's like Odd Pally or Aggro Druid, or it could be like Pirate Warrior, Odd Demon Hunter. Like these decks are making pretty significant upgrades, and I think they're just getting better and better at basting on things like Quest Mage of the world. And so yeah, I think that is also leading to it, where the types of decks that got support just coincidentally some ways just not pushing a more diverse set of archetypes.
Yeah, I'm looking at these anti-control decks, right, that we talked about, the Big Priest, like the big decks of the world, as well as the Malagos Druids and the Quest Mages, and I actually don't think any of them got any significant upgrades outside of Big Priest to any of their decks, right?
Big Priest is definitely the biggest one. But yeah, if you go through the list, like Malagos, Druid, Quest Mage, like
I don't think they got
really get anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it is partially a little bit of a coincidence. Some expansions you just don't get anything. Like it happens. Like Odd Rogue went dead for a year, and then in one expansion it picked up like 10 cards.
Yeah.
Like it's just the way it works.
Same thing with like Secret Mage, right? This expansion got like 4 or 5 brand new cards. But yeah, so let's transition a little bit. Let's talk about some of the recent meta reports that have come out. So first one we want to talk about is the most recent Chinese meta report that's been made public. And before we get into it, just a reminder that we normally look at these Chinese meta reports as kind of a barometer of what the metagame ultimately should be looking like, because they have 10 times the player base than NA and EU combined. So we normally look at what archetypes are popular over there. So let's talk about this. It's up on your screen now. I think the biggest thing to me was Reno Priest is down here as the 7th best deck in the format. What?
Yeah.
I am very confused by this.
I mean, this is the exact thing that we did talk about in a previous podcast, where we were talking about a different Chinese meta report, where I believe they had Reno Priest marked as the 3rd best at the time, whereas most Western players had it as the clear number 1. So this isn't exactly something new. We've kind of discussed previously why this could be the case, but also saying that even though we understand why it could be the case, it also can be a little bit surprising. And we don't have full information on how these sort of meta reports are put together, so we don't exactly have full knowledge on whether it's more opinion driven or whether it's database stuff or exactly how it comes together. So yeah, in that sense, though, it definitely is like something that stands out for sure.
The biggest thing to me is that if you look at all the other decks that are in tier 1, so they have Dark Lair as the best deck, followed by Secret Mage, Reno Secret Mage, Odd Paladin, and then Big Priest, Aggro Druid, and then Reno Priest. And then fleshing out the rest of tier 1, Odd Rogue and Kingsbane Rogue. If you look at that, and I just named all these other decks, I'm sitting here, I'm like, Reno Priest absolutely wrecks all of those other decks. And so I'm very confused as to why they have this. And maybe it's statistics based, and like they have much more data in China than we do over here, and so maybe they're like, okay, everybody's targeting Reno Priest, and maybe the win rate's a little bit lower, all that kind of good stuff. But to me, when I looked at this, I actually laughed out loud. Like, no joke. I actually laughed at Arena Priest being the 7th best deck because it's very contrary to what we talk about basically week in, week out on our podcast about how Arena Priest is the best deck in the format. And it was just kind of a culture shock, right? How different these metagames might actually be.
That's actually very much part of the appeal that I have for these, these Chinese meta reports, right? Where a lot of the value that I see from these Chinese meta reports is they don't come from the same echo chamber that that we're used to, right? They're not involved. Like, we're getting a very, very different opinion sometimes, and that could be a really good thing. It's not necessarily saying we're wrong or that they're wrong or anyone specifically correct, but introducing sort of opinions from a different conversation can be a really, really good thing. Personally, I was actually a little bit disappointed when I saw this report because there was no, hey, you guys aren't playing this deck. This deck's actually pretty good. There's nothing here that looked too surprising, right? Like, we can talk about the placement of decks. We can talk about Arena Priest being not number one. We can go down the list and say, oh, that's kind of weird that, Secret Mage is above this and that, or, kind of go in that direction. But I was just kind of a little bummed out where I'm looking at the top decks and there's nothing that surprised me, really. I'm like, I kind of know what these all look like. I know how they feel.
Know what the matchups are like and all that kind
of
stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's always just really funny because I also see stuff like there's no Arena Mage, right? There's no Pocket Galaxy Mage at all on these meta reports. Whereas, like, we have a ton of it, I feel like, in our format, at least on the North American server. And they have a ton of Mill Rogue, where we have none, right? So it's a little bit interesting, but outside of that, like, this is where we got Dark Glare Warlock from. For those of you guys that don't really remember, the Chinese meta reports were the first ones to kind of point it out, and we're like, hey, Dark Glare Warlock's broken, and that's kind of what kicked off this whole refinement of Dark Glare Warlock in NA and in EU. I mean, we're not really seeing that, so a little bit of an indicator that maybe the meta is a little bit solved. I really hesitate to use that, but especially given that we just had an expansion 2 weeks ago. But it does look like the meta is solved-ish.
Yeah, and it's the same kind of thing we were talking about, where if you go all the way down to Even Shaman, right, and there's that kind of gap, right? You go down to Even Shaman, and that's where you see the drop-off. Above Even Shaman, it's the same thing. It's very much just kind of like Reno aggro. There's no real control. There's the big priest is kind of there. So the one sort of anomaly, I would say. But other than that, you can guys are getting a feel for what we're seeing on ladder, I think. I guess, like, are we counting Dark Lair as combo? I don't even know what Dark Lair is. That's a weird deck.
Dark Lair is Dark Lair. It's its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's its own little thing. But yeah, for sure.
So let's move over to the western side of the world. Let's talk about the recent Tempest Storm meta report. And so we're not really sure kind of the logistics of when exactly these opinions were kind of set in stone, but this came out on the 25th of this week. And it mirrors a lot of what we said, at least in Tier 1, where we have Arena Priest as kind of the top dog, and we have Dark Glare Warlock as the second best, and then you have Aggro Druid and Odd Paladin. And I think a lot of people, if you ask them what are the 4 best decks in the format, would probably give you these 4 decks. And so I think a lot of, maybe not the issues, but a lot of the kind of where our opinions started to diverge, Corbett and I's, from the Tempest Storm meta report was when you kind of start digging into that Tier 2. It's extremely diverse Tier 2, and so kind of nitpicking here is not really, too useful, but we just kind of saw a couple of decks that we were like, this is, the opinion on these are a lot higher than we would currently place these, and we think there's a lot of decks that are super underrated by the Tempest Storm meta snapshot, at least over on the Western servers, that should probably be being seen and played a lot higher, or a lot more, rather.
Yeah, just before we get into it too much, because I don't really like it when people are bashing tier list in any way. Yeah. Ultimately, it's an opinion piece, and just because Meowth and I might have our personal opinions doesn't really mean you should take ours with any more weight, right? Like, it's just an opinion.
We're 100% correct all the time. Everybody should listen to
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that part. Yeah, sorry, we're never wrong. But yeah, so just in case we're pointing out things we disagree with, it's not really bashing and saying, hey, yada, yada, yada. I also think, we were talking about when the Tempest Storm report was published on the 25th. My understanding, I don't work with them or anything. My impression, though, that I've gotten from conversations is that they do generally, review, submit it, and then there's a little bit of a gap before it actually gets published. It takes time.
Yeah.
So, when information is very rapidly changing, in the first few days of new expansion, impressions are rapidly changing.
Yeah.
It's not very difficult to see how something can become a little bit outdated, and it's not really anyone's fault. It's a sort of, it's impossible to work with information that you don't have. But yeah, we can get into things that stood out. The thing that most stood out to me when I was looking down was Quest Mage at number 9. I think I am the Quest Mage basher of the format. Apparently, I am the one leading that charge. Quest Mage is always trash, but no, this time for real, guys. Quest Mage, it's not a very strong deck. It does not do well in the format that we're discussing, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's so aggressive, and like Quest Mage has just lost so much percentage in all these matchups. Like, I don't know about you, Meowth, but I've seen maybe like one Quest Mage, I swear to God, this like entire expansion. Like the deck is non-existent.
I saw one today. I think I saw one today, and I beat it with a meme rogue deck. So
it just feels way too slow.
Yeah.
Like the deck genuinely, I think it just sucks. Like it's fun. Like I'm sure players can put up fine results with it if they, experience with it and all that stuff. But it's just not one of the strongest decks at all.
Yeah, 100% agree. As much as I dislike the deck, I will be the first to admit that I like Quest Mage is, I don't even think in my top 20 best decks in the format right now. I don't think Quest Mage is very good at all. Kind of the second one that stood out to me was Kingsbane Rogue. I actually have played a lot of Kingsbane Rogue this expansion, and it just has not felt good. Specifically because of the same reason, where Rogue is really, really bad generally against other aggressive decks. I think Odd Rogue being the one exception. With stuff like Aggro Druid and Odd Paladin and Discard Warlock being super popular, Kingsbane sucks in those matchups. Like, there's no way to put that lightly. It absolutely sucks in those matchups. It's lost so many percentage points against Arena Priest because of Lucia, right? And Dark Warlocks are sometimes now running taunts, right? They're running the Sun Furies, and so Kingsbane feels a lot worse to me, and having it as the 7th best deck in the format feels really wrong to me.
Yeah, I actually think Kingsbane has a little bit of room for refinement. I don't think the build is super obvious right now with the like Swindle Foxy stuff, but I definitely agree with you. Like, I think it's a fine deck, but not one of the,
it's not the
better ones. But yeah, in terms of the underrated stuff, I think, both be in agreement, and probably a Tempo Storm team themselves, that Odd DH at tier 4 might have been a slight low ball, I think.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I think Odd Demon Hunter... I think if you replace like Odd Demon Hunter with like Quest Mage, then I'd be happy. Like make Odd Demon Hunter the 9th best deck, and then put Quest Mage down in tier 4. I also want to talk about Big Priest. I think Big Priest, they have Big Priest down in tier 3. I think Big Priest it's that 5th best deck for me. I put that behind the top 4. Big Priest is insane. I think it's a very good anti-aggressive deck because of the new builds, right? Where you're full on taunt, and it's really hard for decks to get past that once you get that turn 4, turn 5 Shadow Essence, because you're palm reading and you're insane. And I think, as much as it pains me to say it, I think Big Priest is a very, very good deck in the format.
Yeah, I think it's strong as well. I think it's one of the stronger decks. And for me personally, like if I was doing my tier list, it's kind of like, I'm actually not going to nitpick too much at the very top end because I don't even know how I feel about like what decks come after. Like, I know I feel like Reno Priest is the best, but I don't know after that. Like, it becomes very messy for me.
Yeah.
I know that you seem to have it a little bit more defined, like the way you feel like you've kind of got it a little bit more ordered in your head. I'm not there yet. I don't know. But Big Priest is definitely in that kind of like the next clump. And I feel very comfortable saying Big Priest is really quite good right now. Yeah. But again, like with the Odd DH, I figure I should mention very quickly, Odd DH's build completely changed. So again, when we're talking about the time frame, it's very understandable why it would be like underrated in a report like this. And ultimately, like one of the biggest upsides with opinion piece is that you can get it out really early, right? You can kind of be a little bit predictive in trends. You can try and incorporate new information very, very quickly. That, also comes with a downside sometimes where an opinion has a little bit more variance. Like it can be kind of wrong or not have all the available information, but that's the upside of an opinion-based report, guys. Like that's what you don't get in a VS report that takes like a month to compile, or sometimes we don't get one in an entire expansion. So,
that's why you have a Tempo Storm report a week and a half into an expansion. You might not see a VS report if they don't nerf. If they don't nerf cards, you might see one soon, but
Yeah.
If they do nerf cards, you won't see one for a little bit. But like you said, the whole point of this was not to nitpick these meta reports. It's just kind of point
different
out
discrepancies between what we're thinking and what other reports have been saying.
Exactly. But yeah, let us know what you guys think about the metagame and all that kind of good stuff down in the comments below. But we're going to move on to part 2. In this section, we normally talk about wild news, but we also have this whole little segment about controversial topics, and I don't think there's anything that's been more controversial in the history of Hearthstone than this new Battle Pass that's been released and implemented. And I know we've gotten a lot of requests for comments, both in our Twitch chats and in our YouTube comments, and so we just wanted to take a short little bit here to talk about our Battle Pass opinions and kind of what the community reaction has been. So I know Corbett wanted to start off with a little bit.
Battle Pass. Meowth, what are you talking about? Sorry, I haven't heard anything about this at all.
Have you been living under a rock under the sea?
No. Yes, the Battle Pass stuff. I kind of gave my thoughts pretty in depth on Twitter. So if you want to see like a written version of what I think, then that's a place to go. But the short of it is basically, I wasn't particularly clued into what the Battle Pass controversy was in terms of the actual numbers. I took a couple days ago. I took the time to kind of go through and look at it myself, kind of evaluate exactly like what was happening, because it's kind of nice to look at the numbers yourself compared to just hearing from third, fourth hand sources and things like that. What I will say about the Battle Pass when I actually looked at things, right, is it wasn't nearly as bad as I was expecting. In fact, what I kind of found was that a lot of players that genuinely are going to be in a fine state, if not better. It does hurt certain type of players, where if you're like an aggro grinder previously who was regularly capping out at the 100 gold, yeah, you're probably going to be out 1,500 gold to 2,000 over an expansion. But again, you do make up that in other ways with like a whole bunch of packs rewarded, a whole bunch of legendary. So to me, over like a 4-month period, you're losing out on 1,500 gold, but you're getting other stuff. That's similar to me. So in terms of comparing purely the old system to the new system, I actually don't think it's like a robbery. But, all right, so there's a but here just before anyone starts going nuts.
It's already clipped,
think that
don't worry.
Yeah, but the Battle Pass as a whole is a really good launching point to talk about how expensive the game is, right? The cost of the game. I think that Hearthstone being as expensive as it is has been an ongoing issue for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And I think that ultimately, of course, we want it cheaper, right? Of course, we want players to get more stuff. Of course, we've wanted competitors in the market, right? We've been really rooting for people like Runeterra, I think, in a lot of ways, because you want competition that will drive that kind of that cheaper experience for players. So those two things are there. I also understand the controversy about the expectations that were set, where they said that players will not be earning less gold, and that ultimately didn't really pan out. But again, this is kind of two different issues, right? We're talking about one thing is like the Battle Pass compared to how the old system looked. And the other issue is expectation. They're related, but they're two different things to get kind of angry about, I suppose, or to react to. So to me, like, I totally get it if you're frustrated that Blizzard said that and they didn't deliver, but that's a different thing than talking about what the Battle Pass is, which is, something people are saying that we're getting completely ripped off compared to the old system. And I just haven't found that to be the case when I've like looked at the stats, especially when I'm talking purely about when they've updated the rewards track. I don't know what the original system looked like. Again, I was a little bit behind on this stuff, so I kind of had to catch up. And I'm only looking at the updated version, but to me, it looks pretty much fine. Something else I just want to touch on really quick, kind of like the final issue, is that the kind of narrative that has surrounded content creators who have made videos and posts about the Battle Pass and those who have not, right? So a lot of the people who haven't had the chance or didn't want to even make a comment have been called shills and dogs and a whole bunch of other really foul, disgusting language that is both inaccurate and completely like unwarranted and undeserved. So something I just want to say is that if a streamer isn't informed on an issue at the exact moment you demand them to be, you do not have the right to go off on them. You do not have the right to make any sort of demands of them that they are not informed at the exact moment you want them to be. You also do not have the right to demand that they make a reaction video. No, you don't have the chance to say, hey, this is how you're going to be spending your time. And even though you might mention something 20 times on stream, you didn't make it on YouTube, therefore yada yada yada. Like you're getting cancelled, kind of thing. I also think that players in general completely overestimate how fragile relationships are between content creators and streamers. And so when you're saying you're not criticizing the game because you're a shill, you're completely misunderstanding exactly what kind of relationship people have, how fragile it is. You think Blizzard's going to cancel someone because they made a video criticizing this? No, they're not. And I don't think people are in general afraid in the slightest to give their actual opinion on this kind of issue, because content creators, they drive a large portion of their income from their audience, not from Blizzard. So again, I think people talking about the system is great. Content creators being critical is great, but don't go attacking people. They are not in any way really being brave or heroes when they kind of make this kind of content, because ultimately saying, hey, the game should be cheaper isn't a controversial statement when they're talking about their audience reaction, right? The audience, of course, is going to say, yeah, definitely, great. Game should be cheaper. It's not a brave thing to say that in the slightest. And I don't think anyone is, quote unquote, afraid to stand up to Blizzard at any point, right? So that's kind of all I'll say on that. Again, if you want a little bit more of a clear, coherent sort of response, I do have mine on my Twitter, but that's kind of my immediate thoughts on the Battle Pass.
Yeah, I haven't really made any public statement outside of on my stream, so I did want to take a little bit. I agree with everything you've said. I just wanted to add on to this point about berating streamers. And I think just because a streamer's not actively berating Blizzard or bitching about Blizzard or complaining about it, rather, doesn't mean that we don't care. I think every streamer, if you ask them, like, we acknowledge that there's issues with the Battle Pass and the monetary system, and we want it to be cheaper and we want it to be better for other people. Right, the more people that enjoy playing the game, the better it is for content creators. Right, we understand it, and I think personally, and this is probably true for a bunch of other creators, we just don't want our chat to be constantly full of complaining about the Battle Pass. And I think, just like politics or COVID or all that kind of stuff, we know that it impacts people, right? And we want it to be better for people, but and because it impacts everybody, we know that people are aware, right? And I think engaging in this discourse is fine. If you want to bring it up in a stream and talk about it, sure. But I think, calling people shills because they don't talk about it 24/7 is kind of like that's just wrong. Like, it's okay if we want our chats to not be that, right? And we don't want to talk about it 24/7. But like talking specifically about the Battle Pass, I think they did mess up with the implementation of the Battle Pass, specifically about, like you said, the expectations. They made this statement that you were not going to be making less gold than you currently did, and that's currently not true, right? That's not true. There's no defending that. They screwed up. I fully expect them to address the issues. I know it's been a little bit slower than people want, but like I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, it's been a holiday here in America. The dev team is American, mostly, and they live in America, and it's an American company. They're going to be a little bit slow during the holidays, especially since we're working from home, right? And so I expect them, right, to make a fix. And I would like to say that, like, the game devs aren't terrible people. They're not bad, evil, greedy people like a lot of people on Reddit would want you to believe. Like, the Hearthstone dev team has done a ton in the past year to make the free-to-play or returning player experience a lot better, right? Duplicate protection impacts, giving decks to returning players, among a bunch of the other things, right? And so I think what people are really mad about is the fact that, they're kind of mad at capitalism, honestly, is what it really ends up being. Like, every game is like this nowadays, right? Even the $60 AAA games that people like to compare an expansion to, right, are full of microtransactions, right, to actually unlock the full content, right? DLCs and all that kind of stuff. That's just kind of how the world works, right? The world's a greedy, messed up place when it comes to money, and Activision Blizzard is no different than all those other companies, right? It's $1 billion company. It's how it kind of works, and it's fucked up. And honestly, like, it's fine to admit that, and it's okay to engage in discourse and raise the issue about the price wanting to be cheaper, right? Especially since we're in a pandemic and people are losing their jobs, and I think that's a perfectly apt discussion to have, and something that we should be having conversations about, frankly.
For sure.
And I just think that the focus, honestly, should be less on how expensive the game is and kind of the actual mechanism of how you spend your money, if that makes sense, right? And I want to talk about, like, this is something that's been brought up a little bit about, like, the predatory kind of mechanism of spending your money in Hearthstone, where, like, you don't know what you're getting when you spend $80, right? You were getting X amount of packs, but those packs could have, for example, I'll use personal anecdotes here. For the Skull and Myths Academy pre-order, I bought both bundles, and I opened up about 17 to 18 legendaries, which is insane, right? Whereas in this expansion, I opened up 6 or 7 in 130 packs. Okay? Not knowing what you're getting when you spend your money, I think, is what actually pisses people off, right? I think that's what it is. And you can have an expensive game, right, while it not being predatory. But ideally, you'd like it to not be both. But that's a dream scenario that we live in. But regardless, I think the reaction towards community figures that Corbett talked about is spot on. I think the real part about this discourse that really bugs me and has like really kind of pissed me off is not the fact that like Blizzard wants things to be cheaper, because I want things to be cheaper. I don't want to have to spend that much money on an expansion to get the cards that I want. The part that really bugs me is that if the Battle Pass came out and was implemented and had the same amount of gold, right, you wouldn't be hearing any of this shit. You wouldn't be hearing anything, right? That's the part that kind of blows my mind, right? The community is getting so up in arms, right? And you can debate rightly so or not about this Battle Pass system, but you don't see anywhere near the same scale of reaction towards things that I think matter more, right? Like racism in the community, sexism in the community, toxic discourse in the community. You don't see any of that, right? Or like a lack of representation at divided events. Stuff that should be getting a lot more attention is getting none of this. And I think if the community would argue for these basic things with any amount of, with the same vigor that they argue for this Battle Pass, imagine the effect on the community and how much better of a game Hearthstone would be, right? But the Battle Pass affects them, and this other stuff might not, and so you don't see that kind of discourse. And I think that's the part that pisses me off the most, right? So TLDR, Blizzard fucked up with the Battle Pass implementation. I want the game to be cheaper. I want them to fix the Battle Pass. But just because I'm not here making a video about it or talking about it every 2 seconds, or other streamers aren't, doesn't mean that we don't know, don't care, or aren't chilling. We just, like, it's okay to not talk about it every living moment of our lives. And I think, in general, just people have a lot of pent-up frustration because of 2020 and how shitty of a year it's been. And this is just kind of how they're using it as an outlet right now. And they're just kind of lashing out in a more extreme way. Battle Pass, fixing the Battle Pass is a good thing. Please fix it, okay? Please make the game cheaper, but also make all these other things better as well, okay? But yeah, that's kind of my statement. I know a little bit of a soapbox, but that's, I think, our statements on the Battle Pass. I'm not planning on making another public statement. I don't know about Corbett. I know he made a Twitter post, but if you guys agree with us, great. If you don't, let us know in the comments below. But yeah, with all that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the final segment of our show. Let's talk about our decks of the week. All right, so for our decks of the week, we normally feature three different decks. We talk meta and slightly off meta. So Corbett, do you want to take it away with our first meta deck of the week?
Sure. Let's the mood's been a very, very light, so let's get serious here. Let's talk about Secret Mage. Secret Mage is, one of the decks that, got a lot of this support from the recent expansion. Picked up a whole bunch of really sweet pieces. But something kind of looks missing, don't you think, Meowth, from this list?
Yeah, isn't there like this 6-mana legendary card that we're supposed to be running that I don't see?
Did you forget to put it in here, or?
I don't think so. I think this is a list that I climbed on Legend with really, really well.
Oh, really? So we've cut the Alunith. Now, it turns out when you have like double rigged fair game and the I can't not call it Sage. When you have the double rigged fair game and the Sage, the Alunith is really not that needed. The deck already packs in so much card draw that it really just hasn't felt that necessary. So it turns out getting like an Alunith style effect with a body is better than not getting a body. The rigged fair games have been I think they've been so strong when I've seen them. And so yeah, this is kind of the direction that I've seen a lot of people take Secret Mage in, where we're dropping the Alunith. It's insane. It's really crazy, actually. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, how times have changed, right? I think there's a lot of room still left for refinement. I think 9 Secrets is right. That's my personal opinion. I think 9 Secrets is right, but I think you can change the composition of what those secrets are depending on what your metagame is, right? If you're not seeing a ton of aggro, you can go down to 1 Flame Ward, you can go double counterspell. Duplicate's a card that I've been messing around with that's been actually really, 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 really good duplicating occult conjurers or cloud princes, or even stuff like Medivh valets have been insane, very very strong. The synergy on duplicating an occult conjurer, holy, the value is insane. It's so good. But I will also say fireballs might actually not be correct. They were always just a little bit extra and a little bit awkward, honestly, if you drew them in the early game. So I will say this list performed really, really well for me on Legend Ladder. I do think that cutting Alneth is a conversation worth having. I don't think it's 100% definitive one way or the other, but I think it's a conversation worth having, and I think the list itself is still, very, very raw. Definitely room for refinement.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things that stand out is the lack of Polk Out. I think Polk Out is something that's definitely worth testing. I actually tend to like Fireball in a list like this. I'm more of a fan of it in a list that has heavy card draw. So when we're talking about like double Fair Game and the Sage, I kind of actually like Fireball here.
But like, what about Forgotten Torch over the Fireball at that point? Since we're running so much card draw. Consistent
potentially. Torch has consistently been quite weak, I think. It's never ever looked like not the worst card in the deck.
Okay.
When looking at like HS replay data type stuff, like Fireball hasn't looked like it's a stellar choice at times either, but there's a very, very clear difference between Forgotten Torch and Fireball. Well, yeah, Forgotten Torch look quite bad. But yeah, I don't exactly know like you're saying, the refinement, how exactly to approach this. I kind of still want to get like Ancient Mysteries in here somehow, but I have no idea what I would be doing. Secret composition can definitely change. Like if you're seeing less aggro, then it's got a Flame Ward. You can look at like Netherwind Portal, stuff like that. How have you felt about like the double rigged and the Ice Block and the Flame Ward as all kind of secrets that I don't want to say, but I guess I'd say like they're sometimes highly inactive, is what I'd say. Like Flame Ward and Block not proccing against control, and Rigged Fair Game not really proccing against aggro sometimes.
Yeah, I will actually say that I think the weakest secret here has actually been Ice Block. I have never really had a game that
exactly,
because especially since you have no Alneth, right? You're never, let me put up my block, draw a bunch of cards with Alneth, and try to hope I can burn you out, right? You're never in those situations anymore because you play much harder for board. I feel like.
Yeah.
I will say Double Flame Ward has been a little bit iffy against control.
Yeah.
But I think it's a meta choice that I'm okay playing 2 wards and playing 2 Rigged Fair Games, just because the Rigged Fair Games are so good against Priest, and the Flame Wards are so good against all the other aggressive decks on ladder, that honestly, like, if you're cutting a secret, I would cut Ice Block before either of those, personally.
Yeah, I would definitely co-sign that. I think that like with Double Flame Ward, it's kind of doing a very similar thing into aggro, where you're basically just trying to deny a turn if you get caught behind on board. And I think the Rigged Fair Game can often do something a little bit similar to Ice Block, as being kind of a secret that stays up for a little bit of time, but it's ultimately just like a much stronger card. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I might toy around with it soon.
Well, I will say that like I've often found myself against aggressive decks. My Rigged Fair Game has served as like, this is a secret that's always going to be up for me to play my Cloud Giants and my Conjurers and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
And then occasionally when you finally swing the board back into your favor by playing Flak Mage and a bunch of secrets and kind of dumping your hand, then it serves as the refill, which has been really, 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 really nice. But yeah, I would actually say even between Duplicate and Ice Block I think is the weakest secret so far out of that package of 9. So, but yeah, I think Secret Mage in general, like we said, pretty far from refinement. Who knows? Maybe Alneth is the way to go ultimately. Feel free to change the secret composition. Feel free to try Polka. There's a bunch of things that you could be trying. I will say, the one thing I saw a little bit of discussion about, do not run 1 Flak Mage. Please, do not do that. Flak Mage is one of your best cards in your deck. Please, do not run 1. Okay? That's the only statement I will make as a definitive. And then do you want to talk about our second meta deck as well? This is one that you've been messing around with on ladder.
So I've been kind of just going through a lot of the meta decks, and I finally got to Even Shaman, and yeah, it felt really smooth. I really enjoyed Even Shaman, where it's currently picked up the Wriggling Horrors, and then the Cage Match Custodians. Again, before the expansion, I predicted that we would not be playing Custodian in Even Shaman. I was quite definitive about this, and yeah, I think I was wrong. So the deck has felt super smooth, running a much lower curve. I really like the Wriggling Horrors in this list a ton. Wriggling Horrors is such a great card, man.
It makes a lot of sense in this deck too, right?
It's so great when you can get it on a healing totem on like turn 2 or 3. and just like start making those healing totem value trades before like getting the splitting axe up. And once you get like multiple healing totems going, it's pretty disgusting. But yeah, it felt really strong. So like the curve is much lower. We finally ditched all the 4-drops. The 4-drops have been the weakest cards in this deck for a very long time, whether we're talking about Squall Hunter, Flame Breathe, or Totem Carver. So I've kind of finally ditched them. The Cage Match is a 2-drop, but it definitely provides value, right? It's not like you're completely taking up value out of the deck by cutting the 4s, because you are getting that card draw into the axe. And yeah, I just think it's been really, really good so far. I've been impressed with Even Shaman.
Yeah, it looks really, really good. Wriggling Horror, I've been messing around with a little bit since we talked about it on our last episode. And it literally is a baby Fungal Mancer. And the earlier the Fungal Mancers come out, the better, right? Like, it's been really, really good. And I think I definitely slept on Wriggling Horror. I know you slept on Cage Match Custodian. I kind of was like, this card's not that great. Like, I can see it as maybe an arena card, but no, this card's kind of insane. And I can totally see it being really, really good in this deck as well.
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways it's sort of soft carrying some of the aggro decks I know in Standard.
Okay.
Where Zacho, the lead of the VS report, I think he gave a quote which is basically any deck playing Wriggling Horror has his attention. And I totally understand why. The card is performing really, really well. I've started to throw it in random aggro decks like Discard Warlock. Just anything that kind of is a little aggressive and board floody, I'm kind of giving it a shot because why not? And I think Even Shaman is a really, really good home for it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense in here. I might actually have to try some Even Shaman. It's actually been one of my favorite.
Just dodge the priest.
Dodge the priest, right? It's very easy. Just any deck you play, just dodge priest, right? But yeah, so let's move on to our last deck of the week. So this is kind of our off-meta, kind of for fun deck to play for those of you guys that are chilling on a ranked floor or at the bottom of Legend and you don't really care about climbing. This is the deck that I kind of threw together today on streams. It's a very recent, very raw deck, tons of room for experimentation. But Shuffle Rogue. So this is a deck that got synergy in this recent expansion with Ticketmaster and Malevolent Strikes. And I've been messing around with it because this is kind of an archetype that I used to play, right? I had a deck last year called Candle Rogue, where it was all about Faldoris Riders and Waxadreads. And then obviously you play the Darkness to shuffle candles into your opponent's deck, and it has the upside of mucking with Priest. But this deck actually performed insanely well. So I've been hanging around at like 200, 300 Legend, and I went 9-3 with this deck, which is insane. Like, I don't know how, but it has insane card draw. It has insane comeback mechanisms. Dude, Stowaway, summoning a bunch of 4/4s, and then a Broomstick. Oh, so nice. But I like Foxy Fraud Swindle. I know we've talked about this before in episodes, that those two cards are kind of insane, right? I actually think I might have too much draw in this deck, if that's possible. My hand is always full, but that's a great thing because I'm filling the board while keeping my hand full. It's been beautiful. And I will say, Concerned Mom, if you're watching this, dude, I'm sorry about the 4 Leroy game, but I hit this guy with Leroy, Tenwu, and then double Shadow Steps on the Tenwus to hit him with 4 Leroys. 4 in one turn. It was absolutely disgusting. Tenwu on Leroy is beautiful. But I think there's a lot of room for experimentation. I think the 1-drop Pirates may not be strong enough. The prize blunders have been a little bit awkward going first with no coin. And then obviously the Darkness is a little bit of a meme, so feel free to like run a second Malevolent Strike. I think that's just probably the best way to go. But Shexara I think has been great as like a way to tutor. Like I've used it to tutor my Leroy or tutor my Minstrels so that I can continue to draw through my deck against slow matchups. But also obviously hitting all of the spiders with a Shexara it feels great.
Yeah, I know there might be a couple of people who look at Lisp and get confused by Swindle, where, guys, if you have like one of the shuffle spells in your deck and you draw into it, it'll summon like the 4/4.
Yeah. And draw you a card.
Yeah. And draw you a card. So yeah, the low spell count is very much intentional, and it just gets like so much tempo out of the Swindle in terms of, and value, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah. Dude, Foxy Fraud, I think, is up there for one of my favorite cards of the set. Like, it is so good.
I love that card.
And I will say, dude, the token art on Ticketmaster, the Spooky Bears, actually give me the creeps. It reminds me a lot of the evil villain guy from Toy Story 3. I don't know if you watched that.
What's his name?
I think Twitch told me it was Lotso, so I hope that's what it is.
Lotso, that's the one.
He looks exactly like it. It's so spooky. And I have my Ticketmasters in golden because I opened them golden, and so the golden bears with the claws and the teeth, but it's also great. I love this deck a ton. I think it's competitive and it's a ton of fun to play. I think my worst matchups have been aggro druids, but I've held my own against odd paladins and stuff like that. So take that as you will. But yeah, I'm going to be messing around with this deck a ton moving forward. But yeah, guys, that's going to be our episode for today. We'll be doing State of the Wild episodes every Sunday. So if you guys enjoy these episodes, make sure you guys drop a subscription so that you guys know when they go live, and make sure you guys share with your friends. And just a reminder that we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all your podcast distributors. So if you'd like to listen on the go, make sure you guys check us out there. And before we wrap up, we just have a request for you guys in the community that listen to us. So our recent episode with Raffle was a huge success. We got some great feedback about that. It was very well received. And so we would love to have other community members on our show in the future. So if you guys, have some requests on who you might like to see on the show, let us know in the comments below, and we'll try to get them on the show. Corbett, thank you for joining me on the show. I appreciate you a ton. Let the people know where they can find you.
Guys, you can find me at CorbettGames on Twitch and Twitter and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, give that a look if you want to say more of my content. But yeah, thank you very much for having me out, and I hope all the audience are having a great one. And thank you for tuning in.
I'm totally leaving that in, by the way. I'm not going to cut that out.
I understand. Deserved.
But yeah, you guys, we appreciate you watching. We hope you all enjoyed. Stay safe out there, and hope you're enjoying the new expansion, and we will see you guys next week. Later.
Bye, guys.